Welcome to part 2 of forging a Viking Breitsax. In this part, I will continue on my journey to create a broad, single-edged sword that might have been used in the early Viking Age. In the previous episode, I created multi-layer material for the middle as well as the cutting edge of the sword. However, I still need material for the back of the sax. I often prefer to use wrought iron for this, as it has interesting patterns due to the inclusion of impurities, and on top of that is very soft. Unfortunately, the wrought iron I use comes from the 1887 Globe elevators and is very high in phosphorus. It provides very nice contrast, but also means that it comes apart easily and is difficult to work with. To increase the chances of success, I am folding and forge welding the wrought iron a couple of times before forging it out into a bar. This is very similar to the process that Europeans and Japanese used during Viking times, as the iron was won from a bloomery process and needed to be refined and cleaned by repeated folding at forge welding temperatures. As in my previous videos, I would like to ask for your help. These days, only exceedingly popular content is surfaced by YouTube to viewers, and I would really appreciate your help with sharing links to these videos on your social networks. It may help with getting more views and subscribers, so thank you in advance. I have now folded the wrought iron a third time and will forge weld it again. As a reminder, the bloomery process reaches temperatures in which the impurities are molten and removed from the iron, which remains as a sponge. I made a video on this a few years ago, so please check that. However, the forge welding process may also help with further removing some of these retained impurities. The ultimate test is if the wrought iron can be twisted without coming apart. As with all my pattern welding, the wrought iron will also be forged out into a 3/8 of an inch square bar, that's about 9 mm. While these dimensions can be achieved by eye, I usually place a spacer on the power hammer that stops the travel of the upper die at the right dimension. So, let's take some inventory. I created 2 long square bars with 9 layers of 1075 and 15N20. These will form the middle of the sword. I also created a 1/2 inch square higher layer bar for the cutting edge, and you just saw me finish the wrought iron bar, which will form the back of the sword. As I just told you, my bars for constructing swords or saxes are always 3/8 of an inch wide. Also, this video is about a broadsax, and to achieve the width of this blade, I will forge the 1/2 inch cutting edge bar flat to 3/8 of an inch. This will significantly widen the bar that will form the cutting edge. If you look closely, you can see where part of the bar is much wider already. The spacer on the power hammer makes it much easier to quickly get to the right dimension. However, care must be taken, otherwise the die and spacer will suffer. As you see, I have quite a bit of material. Instead of making a sax for giants, this will form the cutting edge for 2 blades. While not really necessary, I'm grinding off the parts of the bar that I had welded together in the previous episode. This also gives me a clean line to measure from. While I will explain this later, creating this pattern-welded Viking Breitsax will require stacking 4 bars on top of each other. To be able to later weld them, they need to be really square to each other. This is always a struggle, and I don't necessarily get it perfect. So keep that in mind as you see me working. In addition to the edge bar, I also just cut the middle bars to the right length and will briefly clean them before moving on to the next step. To create a herringbone pattern, I will twist one of the bars to the left and the other to the right. My twisting jig makes this easy, but before I can use it, I need to weld the bars to little steel squares that fit the jig. I often wonder how blacksmiths 1,000 years ago would have gone about twisting these bars. I have not seen any finds of specialized tools for this, but find it hard to believe they would just have used tongs for this. The other tool that really helps with twisting is the oxyacetylene torch, which provides a mobile and high temperature heat source. I'm using a rosebud and need to dial in the acetylene and oxygen until I get the right flame. Even twists of these layered bars are important to me since I want an even pattern on the finished blade. To achieve even twists, I heat up a couple of inches of the bar and apply 2 complete rotations, and then move on to the next couple of inches by making sure there's a slight overlap to the previous section. Since the twisted bars need to be forge-welded back to square, I also make sure to remove any obvious scale with a wire brush. As you can see, I'm twisting the first bar to the right. While not entirely intuitive, these directional twists are orientation invariant. That means no matter which way you flip the bar, the direction of the twists will always look the same. This also means to get a herringbone pattern, we need different twist directions. For that reason, I will twist the next bar to the left. Alright, the first bar is completely twisted. If you take a close look, you will see how the twists have a slant to the right. Keep that in mind when you look at the slant for the next bar, which I will be twisting left. Perhaps counterclockwise would be the more appropriate term here. The tricky bit with this process is that the temperature cannot be too high, otherwise it is easy to shear the bar, leading to a waste of a lot of time. During twisting, I make sure to count all the quarter rotations so that I always end up with a complete revolution. This is not important when completely twisting a bar, but it is a good habit for any situation where there are interrupted twists. Alright, the final bar is the wrought iron. I will not twist it as tightly, but so far it looks quite sturdy. Also, when you look at the table, you may see how these 2 bars may lead to the herringbone pattern I'm aiming for. Here is a close look at the wrought iron. Another aspect I have not mentioned is that I always chamfer the bars to reduce the stress on the edges. I have gotten quite lucky here that none of the bars sheared. The next step is to clean off any scale so that they can be forge-welded back to square. Before I do that, let's take a closer look at the twists, and here you can also see how the chamfer helps relieving some of the stress. Without it, the raised twists will be much thinner. A wire brush on an angle grinder easily gets to all the recessed places, and the result is a clean and shiny bar that just screams to be forge-welded again. However, before I can put the bars back into the forge, I need to remove the little metal squares I used to fit the bars into my twisting jig. Since the bars are round now, I need to re-establish a square profile, and I'm using a spacer again to maintain the same dimension across the whole length of the bar. Again, it is important to get the bars hot enough to weld and to keep oxygen away from them, for which I'm using borax as a flux. Here is a quick look at the bars after they have been forge-welded back to square. Once again, I would appreciate your help by sharing links to these videos, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe to my channel. I would also like to say a big thank you for everyone who is supporting me on Patreon now. If you would like to add your support as well, check the link in the description. Your name may appear in fancy letters on the next video as well. See you next time.